Picture a music fan base that has developed its own complete physical language.
Right, like not just slang, but an actual physical way of communicating.
Exactly, a way of communicating across a crowded street without saying a single word. Now imagine this same group operates local community charities.
Which is pretty unexpected.
Yeah, and they run 24/7 crisis helplines out of their own pockets. But, and here's the wild picture, that this exact same group holds an official criminal gang classification from the FBI.
I mean, it sounds like three entirely different organizations, right?
It really does. You are probably wondering who on earth we are talking about today.
Because, you expect a music fan base to stay within the boundaries of pop culture. Maybe they start a viral dance trend or something.
Right.
But you definitely don't expect them to end up in federal intelligence reports or running localized social safety nets.
Which is exactly why we're digging into the Juggalos today. We've been poring over a massive stack of notes for this deep dive, primarily their incredibly detailed Wikipedia history, to figure out how a fan base for the underground hip-hop duo, the Insane Clown Posse, turned into a literal sociological phenomenon.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating evolution.
It really is, and our mission here is to move way past the mainstream punchlines. We want to uncover the actual mechanics of how this community transformed into this fiercely loyal, highly structured, and, let's be honest, widely misunderstood subculture.
To really do that, we have to look at how extreme marginalization works in modern society.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we start?
Well, this is a group of people who intentionally embrace the label of being a scrub or a complete outcast.
Right.
But rather than letting society isolate them, they've actually used that shared rejection to build a nationwide support network.
It's incredible, and we need to start with the literal origin of the word Juggalo, because this was not some clever branding exercise that got focus grouped by a record label.
Oh, not at all.
No, it happened completely spontaneously during a live show back in 1994. Violent J, one half of the Insane Clown Posse, or ICP, was on stage performing a song called The Juggalo.
Right.
And in the middle of the performance, he just looked out at the audience and randomly addressed them as Juggalos.
And the reaction from the crowd was instantaneous. It was just electric.
Really, just from that one moment.
Yeah. It was one of those rare moments where a word just perfectly captures the exact energy in a room. Because of that massive positive feedback loop, Violent J and his group mate, Shaggy 2 Dope, just started using the term constantly.
I mean, why wouldn't they? Right.
Exactly. They use it to refer to themselves, their friends, their fans, and basically all the other artists signed to their label, Psychopathic Records.
And the fan base just absolutely exploded after that, especially following their 1995 album, Riddlebox.
Yeah. That was a huge turning point.
Yeah. By the time their 1997 record, The Great Milenko, dropped, they were writing actual anthems for this newly named community. Tracks with titles like What is a Juggalo and Down with the Clown.
But, knowing when the movement started doesn't really explain why it hit so hard.
That's the real question. Why did this highly specific clown makeup-wearing aesthetic resonate so deeply that it literally birthed an entire subculture?
To figure that out, we have to look at the 1980s. Specifically, the childhood of Joseph Bruce, who would later become Violent J and his brother Robert.
Because the environment they grew up in is basically the engine for everything that follows, right?
Exactly. We're talking about deep, grinding, systemic poverty in the Detroit area. I mean, they were relying entirely on rummage sales for their clothing.
Wow.
Yeah, and for meals, they had to depend on canned food drives hosted by their local school.
And when you're a kid in a harsh middle school environment, walking around in discarded clothes and eating donated food,
you become the primary target for intense, relentless bullying. They were at the absolute bottom of the social ladder.
It's almost like emotional martial arts, what they did next.
That's a great way to put it.
Because by taking the very thing they were mocked for, being poor, wearing rummage sale clothes, and just fully owning it, they completely disarmed their bullies. Joseph and his brother actually gave themselves a name. They called themselves floobs.
Right, the floobs.
Yeah, and Joseph described a floob as essentially a scrub, someone wearing the same ratty clothes every day. But the crucial difference was that a floob didn't even pretend to care about fitting in.
They took their scrubbiness and weaponized it.
Yes, into a badge of absolute pride. I mean, you can't make fun of someone for being a scrub if they are proudly screaming in your face that they are a scrub.
It is a brilliant psychological defense mechanism. But more importantly, it became the entire foundation of the Juggalo philosophy.
How so?
Well, they realized there were thousands of other floobs out there. people living in the exact same discarded, invisible conditions across the country. By extending this family-like embrace to their fellow outcasts, they created a space where extreme marginalization is the literal entry ticket to the community.
Wow. So you aren't accepted in spite of being a misfit.
Exactly. You are accepted because of it.
That is profound.
Okay.
But if marginalization is the entry ticket, how do they actually find each other in the real world?
That's where the visual identity comes in.
Right, because our notes are filled with these highly specific, very vivid visual characteristics. Like, for example, there's this image of an older, beat-up custom sedan. Someone has literally spray-painted the word Juggalo across the hood in massive red letters, and they surrounded it with reproductions of the Psychopathic Records logo, which is this iconic little running guy carrying a meat cleaver known as the Hatchet Man.
That Hatchet Man logo functions almost like a family crest for them.
It really does.
You see it everywhere in this subculture. It is applied to cars, worn as heavy die-cast jewelry, and branded on their clothing lines, which they refer to as hatchet gear.
And the personal styling is just as intense. Like, we have another image in the sources from California of a fan sitting on a BMX bike. He's wearing a baggy, horizontally striped sweater, holding a brown paper bag, and his face is completely covered in black and white evil clown makeup.
The face paint is such a big part of it.
And he's sporting bright neon orange hair. Some fans do their hair up in these massive stiff spikes called spider legs, which mimics the rap group Twisted. They wear corpse paint. And then, of course, there's the Faygo.
Oh, the Faygo. We definitely have to explain the Faygo connection.
Yeah, they notoriously spray each other with thousands of gallons of cheap Faygo soft drinks at concerts.
Right, and that ties directly back to that flu origin we were talking about.
How does soda tie into that?
Well, Faygo is a regional, incredibly cheap brand of soda native to Detroit. In the mainstream hip-hop world, you constantly see artists popping expensive bottles of champagne or high-end liquor to show off their wealth, right?
Oh, totally. It's a huge status symbol.
Insane Clown Posse and their fans took the absolute cheapest, most working-class beverage they could find and elevated it to a sacred ritual. Spraying Faygo is a massive middle finger to mainstream luxury culture.
That is so clever. It is a totally immersive, participatory culture. They don't just dress the part, they actually have their own lexicon.
They do.
They use a distinct call and response in public. They shout whoop whoop to identify other fans in a crowd, and they have a specific hand gesture known as the wicked clown.
Right, where you cross your arms.
Yeah. You make a West Side sign with your left hand and an American Sign Language C with your right. You throw that up across the street, and another Juggalo instantly knows you are family.
It's an instant connection.
But wait, I'm struggling with this a little bit. Help me understand the massive contradiction at the heart of all this.
Okay, what's the contradiction?
Well, on one side, they're constantly preaching about being this wonderfully supportive family of outcasts who look out for each other.
Right.
But on the other side, they are bonding over underground horrorcore rap. For those who don't know, horrorcore is a subgenre of hip-hop that uses extreme slasher movie-style imagery to tell stories.
It's very graphic.
Exactly. Our material explicitly notes they have a tongue-in-cheek obsession with murder and blade weapons. How do those two extremes coexist? A supportive family that unites over, like, lyrical dismemberment.
I get why that sounds completely hypocritical. But it makes sense when you look at how the fans actually process the music.
Okay, how do they process it?
They aren't taking the violent lyrics of Psychopathic Records, artists, as a literal instruction manual for how to live their lives. They view it as catharsis.
Ah, a release.
Exactly. When you live at the very bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, constantly ground down by poverty and judgment, that builds up an enormous amount of aggression and frustration. The horrorcore music provides a safe, highly theatrical release valve for that anger.
It's basically a slasher movie on an audio track.
Precisely. It's entertainment.
Oh.
And Shaggy 2 Tope summed up the community's radical inclusion pretty clearly. He pointed out that Juggalos come from every conceivable background, wealthy, impoverished, all religions, all colors.
Right.
To quote him directly, he said, "It doesn't matter if you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth or a crack rock in your mouth."
Wow. That's a powerful statement.
It really is. It's about the shared feeling of being an outsider, regardless of your starting point. The Roots Music Journal, No Depression, put it brilliantly when they described Juggalos as a mix of goth clowns and modern hillbilly culture.
Goth clowns and hillbilly culture, that is such a specific and perfect description.
Yeah, it's a community of music lovers engaging in a highly theatrical, exaggerated rebellion.
So you have this massive group of people wearing corpse paint, throwing hand signs, and spraying cheap soda. Mainstream society and traditional music venues want absolutely nothing to do with them.
They were completely shut out.
So where do they go? They literally had to build their own temporary city just to have a place to exist without judgment. And that brings us to the Gathering of the Juggalos, or the GOTJ.
Which was founded in 2000. And as Joseph Bruce described it, it is essentially a Juggalo Woodstock.
It sounds like an absolute sensory overload. It is a 4-day annual festival that features concerts, late-night DJ sets, seminars where fans can just talk to the artist, karaoke, and get this actual backyard-style wrestling.
Oh yeah, they have their own wrestling promotion.
Juggalo Championship Wrestling, which launched in 1999.
The sheer scale of the gathering is staggering, especially when you remember how completely ignored this music is by mainstream radio and MTV.
It's totally underground.
Completely. Yet over its first 11 events, from 2000 to 2010, the festival drew a total attendance of roughly 107,500 people.
That is massive.
In 2010 alone, they had 20,000 fans living in this pop-up city of outcasts for nearly a week.
And the culture just kept expanding. In 2012, they launched an annual Juggalo Day to celebrate the fans. In 2013, they started hosting dedicated album shows, playing their classic foundational albums front to back.
Like the Riddlebox Show.
Exactly. The Riddlebox Show in Detroit and the Great Malenko Show in Columbus. When you have tens of thousands of people mobilizing like this, it is impossible for the rest of the world to ignore.
Right. The sheer visibility made pop culture bleed inevitable.
And that's usually when the parody begins. Mainstream media eventually caught on. Saturday Night Live launched a recurring sketch series starting in 2009 about the Kickspit Underground Rock Festival, which was a direct, pointed parody of The Gathering.
Everybody remember those sketches.
They were featured in an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. The comedy Workaholics centered a whole episode around an ICP concert. Vice's music channel, Noisy, shot a raw, unvarnished 20-minute documentary called American Juggalo.
It even crossed over into literature.
Really?
Yeah. John Sanford's 2015 crime novel, Gathering Prey, features a villain who targets juggalos, and it sets the climax at the festival itself.
That's wild. And then you have the celebrities, people like Charlie Sheen, Vanilla Ice, Coolio, and even Chuck D from Public Enemy, openly identifying as juggalos or performing at the Gathering.
But, and this is a big but, that level of massive visibility brings a very dangerous level of external scrutiny.
How do you mean?
Well, when you have 20,000 highly marginalized people, many of whom are dealing with systemic poverty and substance issues gathering in a field, the stakes become intensely real.
It's not just a party anymore.
Exactly. It isn't just a party. There are tragic realities tied to living that close to the edge. The files note several deaths over the years, including a 24-year-old named Corey Collins, who passed away at the 2013 festival.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. The environment is raw, and it inevitably paves the way for how external authorities, like law enforcement, begin to profile the entire community.
Which sets up the most defining conflict of the modern Juggalo identity, because the way they behave as a community versus how the government views them creates this massive, jarring contradiction.
Let's look at both sides of that ledger.
Let's do the community service side first. Because in Florida, starting in 2008, Juggalos organized something called the Dead Stephanie Memorial Cleanup. This was in honor of a local high school student in their community who tragically died of diabetes. They just got together and started cleaning up their neighborhoods in her name. And in Denver, they established a registered charitable organization, literally named Juggalos Making a Difference, or JMAD.
And then you have the Hatchet House in Buffalo, New York. A group of local juggalos decided to start cleaning up Buffalo's east side, but they went way beyond just picking up trash.
What else did they do?
They turned the Hatchet House into a base of operations for local volunteer work, and they actually operate a 24/7 crisis helpline, actively referring struggling community members to social services.
So they are stepping in and providing a social safety net in areas where the government has largely failed them.
Precisely.
But then you flip the ledger and you run into a federal brick wall. In 2011, the National Gang Intelligence Center, which is a branch of the FBI, released a report officially classifying Juggalos as a loosely organized hybrid criminal gang.
It's just jarring to hear that after talking about charities.
It really is. Local and federal law enforcement began linking self-described juggalos to a terrifying list of crimes: drug trafficking, severe assaults, vandalism, burglaries, robberies, and even numerous murders.
We have to look at the mechanics of how the FBI actually justifies slapping a gang label on a music fan base. The key term there is hybrid gang.
What does that mean?
Traditional street gangs have rigid hierarchies, specific territories, and organized leadership. Juggalos obviously don't have that. They are a sprawling, decentralized network of music fans.
Right.
But because some individuals committing local crimes happen to be wearing Hatchet Man gear or sporting Juggalo tattoos, law enforcement agencies started using those cultural markers as proof of gang affiliation.
So they essentially took the actions of a criminal subset and applied it to the entire sociological umbrella.
Exactly.
And that classification triggered a literal civil war within the subculture. According to the federal intelligence files, the community fractured into violent and nonviolent factions.
The internal tension was massive.
The actual criminal elements, the gang members who adopted the Juggalo aesthetic, started looking down on the non-criminal fans. They viewed the peaceful fans as weak, and there are even reports of these criminal Juggalo factions committing targeted attacks on the non-gang affiliated fans.
It really became a battle over the soul of an identity. The nonviolent Juggalos vehemently reject the idea that gang activity has any place in their world.
Because that's not what the music was about for them.
Right. To them, the horrorcore music, the face paint, and the Faygo are about unity and surviving poverty together, not organizing criminal enterprises. Yet, paradoxically, both the peaceful charities and the violent factions fiercely claim ownership of the Juggalo family concept.
Which naturally leads to an incredibly aggressive legal pushback. The Insane Clown Posse and their record label did not just roll over and accept the FBI's gang label.
Well, not at all.
In 2012, ICP filed a lawsuit against the FBI. They ended up withdrawing from that specific suit later that year, but it was really just a strategic retreat. Psychopathic Records launched a website called juggalosfightback.com.
Which was a really smart move.
Yeah, they directly asked their fans to submit personal stories of being harassed, fired from jobs, or targeted by local police simply for wearing an ICP t-shirt or having a Hatchet Man bumper sticker on their car.
They were systematically crowdsourcing legal evidence of federal profiling. And it is a fascinating strategy because it highlights a massive civil liberties issue.
How so?
Well, if the government can label a music fan base, a gang based on the clothing they wear, what stops them from labeling Deadheads or Twifties or punk rock fans as criminal enterprises if a few of them happen to commit crimes?
That's a terrifying thought. And that exact argument brought in some serious heavy hitters. The technology magazine Wired published an article in November 2011 just ripping the FBI's decision to classify Juggalos as a gang, comparing the logic to previous heavily criticized intelligence overreaches.
It was becoming a mainstream civil rights conversation.
Exactly. And then, on January 8, 2014, the Insane Clown Posse filed a new lawsuit against the FBI. But this time, they weren't alone. They were officially joined by the American Civil Liberties Union of Michigan.
The ACLU.
The ACLU. Their goal was clear: force the government to declassify Juggalos as a gang and legally compel the FBI to destroy all the criminal intelligence information they had gathered on innocent fans.
It is a truly remarkable trajectory. Think about where we started this conversation.
Yeah.
A group of impoverished kids who proudly call themselves scrubs and floobs, who paint their faces like evil clowns and spray cheap soda, eventually partnering with one of the most prestigious civil rights organizations in the United States to fight the federal government in court over First Amendment rights.
It's unbelievable.
It completely shatters every preconceived notion we have about how communities organize themselves and where structural power actually lies.
It really does. I mean, if you're listening to this, you start out listening to this deep dive, picturing a pop culture punchline, and you ended up uncovering a highly complex society built by the outcasts, for the outcasts.
Complete with their own charities.
Yes. Charities, their own dialects, internal civil wars, and federal civil rights lawsuits.
The vital takeaway here is how this story challenges our assumptions about institutional labeling. It proves that marginalized people can find profound, mobilizing power by reclaiming the exact things society mocks them for.
Reclaiming the scrub identity.
Exactly. But it also serves as a stark warning about the danger of broad government profiling. When you paint an entire sprawling community with a single brush based on the worst actions of a few, you end up criminalizing the very people running the 24-hour crisis helplines.
That is incredibly well said, which leaves us with one final, undeniable thought to carry with you. If a group united solely by a shared love of underground horrorcore hip hop can evolve into a recognized cultural family, one that simultaneously runs community cleanups and battles the FBI in federal court, what does that say about the extreme, almost desperate lengths humans will go to find a genuine sense of tribal belonging in a modern, isolated world? Think about that next time you see a Hatchet Man logo or a bottle of Faygo.